Hello.
Our story begins on the planet of Florum, amidst a duel between two longtime rivals. Savage Oprez had just killed Jedi Master Adi Gallia, and Obi Wan, last minute, pulled her lightsaber and retreated into the facility that once held him, Dooku, and Anakin at the beginning of the war. Obi Wan caught up with Hondo and his pirates as the two of them quickly came up with a plan. Obi Wan knew he could hold his own against Savage and Maul, though that's not what he was trying to do to engage them. Hondo didn't care, better Kenobi than him. They began running down the hallway and split up, as Obi Wan caught the attention of the two crazies, as Hondo called them. The rest of the pirates got caught in the trap set by Hondo. Obi Wan continued running, escaping the two Zabrak warriors. Maul's clawed feet echoed in the hallway behind him as he prepared for this encounter with Maul. Kenobi ran to the edge of the hallway and turned around. For whatever reason, Maul gave Obi Wan a chance to surrender, which led Obi Wan to feeling more confident about his decision to split off from the group of pirates. Maul then told Kenobi that there were two of them and one of him. Obi Wan did like the odds, but he responded telling Maul that they didn't have to fight. Maul hissed and moved forward. Kenobi ignited Gallia's and his own lightsaber, blocking the attack. Savage moved around, getting to Obi-Wan's other side, which forced the Jedi Master to divide his attention between the two opponents. Despite his and Anakin's failure to defeat Savage before, Obi-Wan figured out the approach. Savage was a hulking powerhouse. Obi-Wan needed to be dainty with each encounter he made against Maul's brother. Maul got angrier the more the duel moved on, but Kenobi was more focused. He was unbending in every instance of the fight. Kenobi slid out and blocked a strike from Savage before kicking him in the knee. He knew that the bigger they are, the harder they fall, and so he was testing that theory out on Savage. Maul didn't take any notice of it, but he noticed how defensive Obi-Wan was being. This was a stark contrast to their last two engagements. Maul didn't let it beat him though. Obi-Wan continued his pursuit of victory as he dodged and parried strikes before being shoved backwards. He slammed against the wall and last second reignited his weapons and blocked Maul and Savage at the same time. They would not beat him and the Force was his ally. Kenobi turned to Maul and told him that they didn't need to be this way. Maul shoved his blade down with all of his strength, but Obi-Wan was operating through the Force as a vessel of it, an awakening if you will. For Obi-Wan, the only thing he locked onto was Maul. This was really tantalizing for Maul. He never experienced anything like this before. It was like Obi-Wan's focus was becoming a part of Darth Maul. Savage noticed this, but he was not a part of it. Kenobi had become one with himself. Instead of focusing on the battle at hand, he focused on the moment between the two longtime adversaries. He was calming an animal. The primal state of the existence that Maul lived within for so long kept him in a mindset that belonged to an animal. His actions reflected that of a primal beast, which Obi-Wan caught on to. His few interactions with extremely territorial, violent animals in the past taught him that they were only defending their territory. However, an animal does not attack without reason. He applied these methods and it started to wind itself into Maul's subconscious, and he slowed down. His eyes focused on Kenobi, and then he broke out of the spell, telling Obi-Wan to get out of his head. Obi-Wan didn't move. He continued his calm and collected stare, which caught Savage's attention. The peacefulness of the Jedi Master embodied what it meant to be a Jedi. He told Maul that they didn't have to be adversaries. Maul brought his blade back down and slammed it against Obi-Wan's, but it made no progress. Obi-Wan just looked at Maul and told him the same thing, which truthfully made Maul angrier. Obi-Wan slipped Maul this time, kicking Savage in the knee, sliding out from under the two of them. Obi-Wan, instead of cutting through Savage's arm, got to his feet and used the Force to launch the two of them into the wall behind him. Maul looked at Obi-Wan, who held the blades in his hand, and extinguished them. He told Maul that he didn't want to fight them anymore. Savage was so confused, so he looked over to Maul. The former Sith apprentice got to his feet and told Obi-Wan that he languished for years because of him. Obi-Wan asked Maul if he thought that the death of his master didn't hurt him too. Maul stood there for a moment, his brain short-circuited. He didn't even consider it. Sure, he gutted Qui-Gon on Naboo, but the thing Maul only considered when it came to Kenobi was the physical agony rather than the mental. This didn't change anything for Maul. He still wanted to rip Obi-Wan's throat out. Kenobi held the lightsaber close to him as he watched Maul climb to his feet. He looked at Kenobi and told him that he wanted nothing more than for him to suffer. Obi-Wan said he understood that. He understood Maul because he had seen his village, he had been there. There was no way for him to understand what the Sith put him through, but he wasn't willing to continue participating in his languish. Maul got furious and launched himself at Obi-Wan. The Jedi had a chance to kill Maul. The strike was open, but he slid under him, allowing the lightsaber to slide across Maul's robes, but not contact his skin, before kicking Maul in the back and igniting the other lightsaber near Savage's neck. Maul slammed into the wall and turned back around. He looked at Kenobi with confusion and then felt down to where his robes were cut. Maul told him that he missed, and Obi-Wan asked if he really thought that he would miss such an easy strike. He had Maul dead to rights and spared his life. Maul gritted his teeth and clenched his lightsaber even harder. Obi-Wan told Maul not to try it. There was no point in losing his brother. Maul demanded to know what Obi-Wan wanted, and he just told him he wanted peace for both of them. Obi-Wan had more than enough reasons to lament Maul for having returned from the dead, but instead of doing that, he let go of it and became better for it. He was asking that Maul do the same. Let go, move on, and leave the past in the past. Maul looked at Obi-Wan with a scowl and then down to his blade. There had to be a catch. Kenobi told Maul that he understood how important brotherhood was for his people. He would not infringe on that, but he would let him know that the belonging Maul was looking for didn't sit with the Sith or behind him. It was in his journey ahead of him. Obi-Wan extinguished his lightsabers and stepped away from Savage, who looked at the two of them, not fully understanding the depths of their rivalry unfolding before his eyes. Obi-Wan took a small device off his belt and held it out to Maul. He looked at Obi-Wan, demanding to know what it was. Kenobi just said that when he needed that belonging, he could find it by using the device. He stepped back and told Maul that he was only letting him go on the condition that he would stop harming innocents and stop trying to engage with pirates. There was so much more to the galaxy than trying to hurt others for his personal betterment. Maul looked at Kenobi as he told Maul he should probably get out of here before the pirates try and find him. They wouldn't be as forgiving as he was. Maul really resented this, but considering Savage was limping because Kenobi caved his knee in, he knew the fight was over. Obi-Wan nearly bested both of them. He could have killed Maul, and he almost removed Savage's arm, which likely would have caused his own death as well. Obi-Wan stepped back, and the two brothers got away from him. They made their way to the vessel and got to it before Hondo and his men returned from their little agreement, which was Hondo bringing them back into his ranks and turning them against the Sith. Savage and Maul were able to escape, and they went far, far away from Florum. Upon his return to Coruscant, Obi-Wan would address the death of Council member Adi Gallia and hand over her lightsaber. He would also inform them of the entire confrontation with the two Zabrak brothers. The Council could have truthfully been upset with Obi-Wan for not having killed them, but the reason he didn't kill them is the reason why Obi-Wan was on the Council. He was the best of them. His moral code was much greater than most Jedi, and his ability to not just hold his own, but reject the dark side, revenge, and anger made him all the more impressive in his feat on Florum. Obi-Wan wasn't here to boast either, he was just simply here to inform the Council of what had happened. Inside of the craft Maul and Savage used to escape the pirate world with, they discussed the events that had just transpired in front of them. Savage tried to understand it, but Maul wasn't speaking. The reason it actually got somewhere with Maul is because it was tough love. It wasn't merciful, it didn't put him down, it showed him that he was inferior to Obi-Wan in a way and then told him to clean up his act or he would die. Maul truthfully considered the fact that Obi-Wan was tracking him with the little device that he was given, but after searching through it, it only became more apparent that Maul was being paranoid. Obi-Wan just gave him a communication frequency that he could use to contact him whenever he needed someone. Maul didn't really know how to feel. Aside from the short stint he was currently on with his brother, he had always had no one. The longing for belonging always evaded him, and because of the way Sidious had trained him, there was never any way for him to feel like he was loved by anyone. Maul was a brute and trained in the dark arts. He was raised to be a monster. He was taught everything by truthfully the most evil man in the galaxy. Palpatine was a vile creature, and he had pretty much always been that way, loathing his family from a young age. He instilled all of his hatred into Maul, and for the first time in his life, Maul was completely embarrassed. But he wasn't tortured or disrespected for it. He was given a chance to completely turn his life around. Of course, being that Maul was so new to the concept, he flat out rejected it. He told his student that they would be going to a planet to start out their own regime. Savage was curious as to what that meant, but Maul had a plan. There was a planet on the outskirts of the core worlds that was a perfect place for them to rebuild. Savage asked for the name, and Maul told them that it was called Hosnian Prime. It would be the perfect place to be. He was unsure of how close it was to the war, but due to his previous knowledge, he didn't believe the planet would be too active during the Clone War. He was sort of correct. There was an organization named the Zerka Arms, which was a factory complex in the lower levels of the planet that practiced slavery. Maul knew about it because he saw a piece about it during his years with Sidious. Out of all the details Maul was privy to, none of them were truly important. To Sidious, Hosnian Prime was just another piece of the puzzle. It didn't matter in the long run, and Maul's knowledge of it only granted him somewhere to go. When the two Sith arrived, they began their work to actively undermine the Zerka factory. Maul got back into the flow of things after being put off by what Obi-Wan did. He and Savage killed some of the heads of the factory and took over. Because the Zerka factory is on the lower levels, Maul was able to implement some strategies of manipulation. He learned all these by being raised by the Sith Lord. Though Maul had been subconsciously changing within his own mind, the humanity that he was shown lit a spark for something truly great. On the outside, Maul was still heartless as a monster who preyed on the weak. It's all he knew up until this point in his life, so why would he make an immediate course correction? He wasn't actively taking control of the Zerka Arms factory. He was sitting in solitude, reminiscing about the decade he spent buried in trash, believing that his mere existence would add up to nothing. His only lot in life had been pushing a boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down before he got to the top. Having Savage by his side through this really allowed him to feel like the darkness would serve both of them. Maul did, in a way, listen to Obi-Wan. He avoided pirates. Mercenaries, on the other hand, were free game. He took advantage of those working in the lower levels of the city world and forced them to either work in the factory or work for him. He had a lot of good luck with this, but his mind began racing towards what he could build from this. The Zerka Arms factory wasn't galaxy renowned, so Maul knew what he needed to do was garner attention for allies. With a number of mercenaries, he wasn't able to do much of anything. They didn't have a fleet, and they weren't super well-trained fighters either. There were varying degrees of how good or bad they were. Some were extremely talented, while others could manage to shoot themselves instead of anyone else. It was a tragedy, and Maul's fledgling little empire had no shot at becoming what he wanted it to become. The early, seemingly failure of this little endeavor had Maul looking back at the encounter he had with Obi Wan on Florum. Obi Wan was a Jedi Master fighting in a war, which was all the more ironic. But Maul wasn't seeking belonging. He had his brother. There was no reason for him to want to reach out to Obi Wan. But the offer still continued to feel all the more tempting. With Zerka getting nowhere, he tried to think of a way to channel aggressive expansion. However, that didn't work when his operation was discovered by the authorities on Hosnian Prime. While the authorities were not a worry, the one person who happened to notice was. Maul and Savage had no issue cutting down police droids and soldiers who ferried their way down to the district where the factory and base were set up. Though when Maul felt a familiar presence, he felt nothing but terror. Savage had no idea what it was, but it was darker and more brooding than those who called Dathomir home. The Night Sisters and Mother Talzin didn't emit such darkness, such repulsive evilness. Maul woke up from his sleep when he felt the icy cold presence touch down on Hosnian Prime. Maul looked around and told his guards to be ready. They quickly got their weapons ready and moved out. Maul, on the other hand, tapped on a communication device. He hated that he was doing this, but he didn't believe Savage would be ready enough for this confrontation. They would need assistance. The only reason he was doing this was he was hoping the Jedi would get here in time, sacrifice their lives, and allow Maul and Savage to escape into the darkness. Maul contacted Kenobi and left him a message. As he left the message, he saw the tracker blink. The device was actually a tracker, but it was an activated one. He didn't realize it until this exact moment. Maul placed it on the table inside the facility, but last second decided to grab it and hid it inside of his belt. Savage and Maul moved out of the facility. The guards looked down towards the darkened streets of the planet, and one by one they dropped on the ground. There was a shadow, and some of the men were lucky enough to open fire, but it didn't do them 1 ounce of luck. Sidious pulled them down and cut them into pieces before hiding into the darkness again. Maul watched the men run in terror as they realized that this operation was over with. Maul turned to his brother and told them to come along with him. Sidious stood in the shadows, keeping his weapons hidden. He knew his apprentice would come down to him and try to make an apology. Sidious waited, and then when Maul eventually got down to the streets, he saw him. He couldn't see anything other than the silhouette of the shadowy body. Maul spoke up and told him that he would like to offer his loyalty once again. Sidious asked for what, and Maul told him that this facility here, it was the beginning of something Sidious could take great use of. Sidious just laughed and told Maul that he was a fool for believing that he would truly accept this lie. Maul asked what that meant, and Sidious reminded him that there were only 2 Sith, and Maul was no longer his apprentice. He was now a rival. Sidious with little effort launched Maul and Savage. The fight was over before it began. Sidious would enjoy his food though. It was so rare for him to be able to fight someone. He wanted these 2 Zabraks to feel like they stood a legitimate chance against him. Savage and Maul ignited their weapons and launched a counterattack against Sidious. The Darth Lord ignited 2 of his own blades and moved in for the counterattack of his own. The brothers had to be quick. They moved in and struck. Savage was so aimless in his attempts. He was trained by Maul for a couple months while they were down here building this little factory, but all that time meant nothing to a lifetime of power that Sidious had. Truthfully, Sidious was here for Maul. While Maul had no information to offer, Sidious loved the idea of torturing Maul for having survived his feat on Naboo. It was a Sith way of doing things. Maul and Savage were trying to keep up with Sidious, but it was a true show of Sidious's strength. He wasn't even going full speed. He was taking his time and he wanted to enjoy every second of Maul's defeat. Maul was taking the brunt of the assault, and all he could do was hope that the Jedi would get here soon. But there was no way they would. Coruscant wasn't close enough of a planet to get here in time. Obi Wan had left Maul a message in return, but due to the ensuing battle, he missed it. Savage was then singled out by Sidious, who joyfully, without even looking, killed the Sith apprentice. Sidious launched Savage into the air and then turned back towards Maul and told him to remember only 2 there were. This was a reiteration of what he said earlier, just because Sidious loved rubbing salt in the wound. He watched Maul run to his dying brother, who ended up dying in his arms. Maul got angry and took Savage's weapon and ran forward. He leapt up and slashed down, igniting the other lightsaber. Sidious was just being disrespectful at this point, as he kept his blades hidden and just avoided each and every single swing without making a counterattack. Sidious quickly ignited his weapons and slapped his blades up against his opponent, and with a legendary 3-point saber combo, Maul lost both of his blades and then he was on his back, begging for mercy. But there was no mercy. Electricity rang from Sidious's fingers and they covered Maul's body. He was left with nothing but pain. When Sidious was done, he had Maul taken to Stygon Prime at the Separatist prison complex called the Spire. Sidious went there so he could meet up with his student Dooku. Maul was held up in prison in a configuration left hanging there while Sidious went to talk with Dooku. While Sidious didn't make it clear, the entire purpose of this operation was to have Maul lure Mother Talzin out. She hadn't yet been fully killed, and Sidious wanted her gone. She was far too powerful to still exist out in the reaches of the Force. One could only imagine what would become of him if she was allowed to continue existing. Her dark magic was nightmarish even to him. Dooku just thought he was here to interrogate Maul to learn more about what the operation he was building on Hosnian Prime was, and that's how he would approach the interrogation. Sidious didn't tell him anything. While Sidious and Dooku were talking, the doors were burst down. Battle droids were thrown into the hallway where Sidious and Dooku were. Sidious looked over and saw Mace Windu and Yoda. He turned to Dooku and told him to handle this. Dooku commanded his weapon and looked at the Dark Lord as he made his way to the exit. He couldn't be discovered, and Dooku knew that to make this plan work he needed to be a diversion, though he couldn't help but admit to himself that he was annoyed that his lot in life was to sit here and stall. Sidious started down the hallway when Plo Koon, Depa Billaba, and Agon Kola rounded the corner. Sidious liked his odds. He could hear Dooku, Yoda, and Windu engaging in their duel, and so his weapons ignited and they launched themselves at the Jedi. Because the Jedi were prepared for this, they quickly defended themselves from the Sith Howl. Sidious's two blades were incredible with the speed they moved at. Plo, Depa, and Agon were all quick to defend each other, but also quick to counter. Dooku, on the other hand, was struggling against his foes, who pinned him back early on. In Maul's cell, Obi-Wan broke in with Kit Fisto. Obi-Wan asked if he was alright, and Maul looked on in shock. He never expected them to come for him, and he expressed it. Obi-Wan apologized, telling him that they were all en route when his location changed. He then asked about Savage, but the look on Maul's face said everything he needed to know. Obi-Wan let Maul down and caught him, hoisting him back up and telling him that he was sorry for his loss. Maul asked where Sidious was, and Obi-Wan said that the Council was here to defeat him. Obi-Wan lifted up a lightsaber and handed it to him. Maul ignited a green lightsaber and looked at Kenobi, telling him it wasn't his color. Obi-Wan commented on how he thought it suited him, before turning and running out the room. Fisto ran out first, and he was flanked by Maul and Kenobi. They listened for the sound of lightsabers, and they entered the hallways to see Sidious fighting with the power and precision that he had. Dooku was on a back pedal, and he led Windu and Yoda forwards towards his master. Maul hissed and told the Jedi that Sidious was his. Obi-Wan grabbed Maul's arm and pulled him back, which did save Maul from having his face ripped into pieces by Sidious. Obi-Wan told Maul to focus, not let the anger get the best of him. Maul looked at Obi-Wan and Kenobi nodded his head, telling Maul he had this. The three Jedi moved in as Agon was kicked in the stomach and flung into the wall. Plo Koon pressed forward. His heavy strikes were a threat, but the speed of Sidious was all too great. The saving grace was the movements of Depa Billaba. The Jedi had each other's back. Plo and Depa were then thrown backwards as Sidious charged the other three opponents. Maul, Kenobi, and Fisto moved in tandem. Each of their strikes and movements were a perfect counter to Sidious. Obi-Wan's defense, Fisto's Form 1, and Maul's aggressiveness meshed all together perfectly. Their blades soared at the Sith Lord, and he was quick but not quick enough. He heard the sizzling sound of a lightsaber and felt Dooku go cold. Windu killed his former friend, the way he should have on Geonosis at the beginning of the war. Yoda and Windu moved forward, and they watched Maul swing violently. Kenobi brought Sidious off balance by switching into Form 4 in the middle of their duel. Fisto's Form 1 was already putting him off, and the combination was too varied for him to hold his own against them. Sidious slouched back, and Maul was the one who extinguished his life. He cut Sidious in half and championed his victory before going at him again. Obi-Wan ran up and caught Maul before he could strike the dead body. He held both ends of his arms and told Maul that he was gone. Let him go. Maul was still moving forward, and Obi-Wan had to use a lot of his physical strength to hold him back. Maul yelled, telling Obi-Wan to let him go, but he stopped. He told Obi-Wan to let him go in a weaker voice. Obi-Wan pushed Maul back and looked into his eyes and told him it was over. Sidious could not hurt him anymore. The Jedi in the area, still on edge, due to Maul still holding a lightsaber, looked on. Maul took a heavy breath, followed by a couple more. Obi-Wan held him at arm's length and told him he was okay now. There was no reason to fret about it. The Jedi had his back. The sound of blades extinguishing filled the air, and Maul looked around and then stepped backwards. He lowered the blade and looked to each of the surrounding Jedi Masters around him, and he told him he didn't know what to do. Yoda looked up to him and told him that the choice now belonged to him. All he had to do was make that choice. If he could do that, then perhaps they could all find some peace together. Maul didn't know what that was supposed to mean, but he looked around as the Jedi started to file out of the hallways. There would likely be battle droids coming for them, and it was time to go. Obi-Wan stood next to Maul, and he asked the Jedi Master how he was able to obtain such peace with himself. Obi-Wan smiled and patted Maul on the shoulder and told him to let go. What was done was done. The belonging he was searching for was not behind him, it was ahead of him. Whether that be with the Jedi or not, it was up to Maul to figure out that himself. There was a Republic shuttle waiting for them, and they hopped into it and departed. The Jedi were talking about how they could potentially end the war with the Sith dead. They had already checked their bodies and learned that Sidious was the Chancellor, and realized how odd it would be to bring that up to the Republic, that they just murdered Palpatine. They couldn't let anyone become aware of it. Though with Dooku and Sidious dead, there was a chance for the Jedi to begin getting the war to a conclusion point. The one thing that they hadn't considered yet was the fact that the Republic Senate had the collective brain cells of fusion reactor, and General Grievous also existed. Maul would follow the Jedi to the temple and last second get cold feet and abandon the idea altogether. Though he kept this new lightsaber and the communication device that Kenobi gave him, Maul was set free on Coruscant. The first day wasn't too eventful, but without anyone to support him or be around him, the chain of the dark side started pulling him back in. He couldn't help it. There was no stability within him that helped him keep himself under control. So he just started to fantasize about becoming the Sith Lord, the final one at that. The spot was open. With Dooku and Sidious gone, he could reign supreme as the one and only Sith Lord in the galaxy. It also didn't help that the Force was so out of balance thanks to the onset of the Clone Wars. While Maul was getting closer to furthering himself into the darkness, the Senate began to panic as it had been a number of weeks since Palpatine vanished and they needed a new leader. This brought in an unpopular choice, especially from the corporate greed that left a permanent stench on the Republic for decades, nearly centuries. The reason this particular senator became Chancellor was because of her caucus and the voice some of her closest allies had. Chancellor Amidala was used to having a target on her head, which is why many people were trusting of her to lead the Republic. The issue wasn't that they agreed or disagreed with her, it was more of their belief in her to be the leader of a wartime government, the one that they needed. She survived copious assassination attempts and used her voice to try and bring people back together. Obviously, this was before the death and assassination of Senator Mina Bonteri. Without Dooku holding his leash, Grievous was mental. He began getting aggressive and put the Republic into a deeper war. While the Republic was militaristically sound at this point, Grievous and his forces were still many, and they were overpowering due to their sheer size of a military. While Padme hated the idea of trying to enforce the militaristic side of the war, she had to do it because if she didn't, they would all lose. All of her attempts to reconcile were shaken away due to what Palpatine left behind for her. If it wasn't for his leadership before she took command, the peace process would have been done and over with. The weird thing is both governments, generally speaking, blame the other for the death of their respective heads of state. The Jedi kept quiet on the matter, but they actively started getting involved in the Senate to make sure there weren't any other Sith around. Padme allowed this because she and her allies were extremely close to the Jedi. Not quite as close as she and Anakin were, but you know. Maul, on the other hand, would continue for months trying to start down the dark path again, but every time he started, he pulled back and rejected something that made his body recoil. He couldn't help but feel the poison seeping into his skin every time he tried. And then after some months of solitude on the lower levels of the city world, he called to Obi Wan and requested a chance to speak with him. Obi Wan told him he was off-world, currently trying to hunt down General Grievous with Skywalker and Ahsoka. He told Maul that he could send a Jedi to him though. He was at the beginning very apprehensive about it, but then he agreed. Master of the Order Mace Windu was present on the planet, and so he went down to the lower levels of the city to talk with Maul. He was genuinely surprised when someone with such a high rank came down to the lower levels to speak with him, but he at the very least felt like he was being taken seriously, which meant the most to him. Mace came down and asked him what was on his mind, and Maul told him that he didn't want to be alone and he feared solitude. Mace reminded him that fear was a path to the dark side, and Maul understood this, but he didn't want to continue being a servant of it. He wanted a place of belonging, and Windu asked what he could do for Maul to assist him with his wishes. Maul didn't know. He expressed that he at the very least appreciated the effort to come down here and talk to him. Mace looked to his side and then took a deep breath. He told Maul that perhaps there would be a chance for him to become a Jedi. His efforts in destroying the Sith were incredibly important to the Order and for the galaxy. Mace told him that he would give him a chance. He had one chance. He couldn't mess it up though. Mace told Maul that he'd be under his direct guidance and he would show Maul how to take that dark side energy within him and turn it into something positive, something that wouldn't just help himself, but others. Though he did tell Maul the risks. If he accepted this offer, he would become a Jedi Padawan, and he would have to learn to embrace the Force in a new aspect. Everything he knew would be stripped away from him, and he'd be taught how to be a new man. On top of that, he would follow him on battlefronts across the galaxy in a means to bring balance to the Force and the galaxy. Maul was ready. But first, Mace had to make sure the Council approved of these actions. Obviously, Maul had done some positive work to garner an audience before the High Council. Being that most of the Council members were with him on Stygon Prime when he killed Sidious, they would likely be confident in his acceptance into the Order. On the other hand, a stress relief became stress for Anakin and Padme when they had twins. Being that Padme was the Chancellor, she was always stressed, and when it came to having not stress whenever Anakin was in town, she took the opportunity. Of course, not stress resulted into more stress. Joyful. Thankfully, 3PO would be able to hopefully be a good nanny. During Padme's time as Chancellor, she did have to convict a Jedi she found responsible for a bombing on the Jedi Temple, though Ahsoka was never in the talks. Simply due to the changing lines in the battlefront, Skywalker was nowhere near Kiddo Modi when the temple was bombed. Instead, he and Ahsoka were on Ringo Vinda. The twins Tip Lee and Tip Lar were the ones brought back to Coruscant to complete the investigation for the Jedi. Anakin was obviously surprised by the birth of his children, but he did welcome it. Though there was a war at hand, and he believed that he needed to help the war end before he could truly be a part of their lives, which is something Padme also agreed with. The peace talks were getting somewhere, and with the survival of Duchess Satine Mandalore, peace talks were actively being held there. Death Watch had been destroyed by their own ignorance, and the Darksaber was lost amongst the tribe, constantly being fought over nearly daily. Though the one interruption to the peace talks was General Grievous. But once the Separatists separated themselves from him, it became even more obvious that the war was being perpetuated by individuals rather than governments. The ceasefire was called upon, which allowed the Republic to find and hunt down General Grievous. This was a mission that involved Obi Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. While Ahsoka joined them on the campaign, she was leading the troops elsewhere when Anakin and Obi Wan defeated Grievous. The battle was intense, but the combined strength of Anakin and Obi Wan were more than enough to shred the good general, and ensure the collapse of his resistance. When Obi-Wan and Anakin returned to Coruscant, Obi-Wan got to see Maul for the first time since he was voted on being allowed into the Order or not. For Kenobi, it was extremely relieving. To see Maul in such a state warmed his heart, though part of it did hurt. Every time he looked at the Zabrak warrior, he thought of Qui-Gon being murdered on Naboo. But this is what his master would have wanted. Had Kenobi tried to kill him or Savage when they were on Florum, he would have been the antithesis of what Qui-Gon was. A Jedi used the Force for defense, never offense, and Obi-Wan knew that Qui-Gon would have been proud of the man he became. Though when Obi-Wan saw Maul, he knew something was up because he came up to Obi-Wan with a radiant smile. Maul told Kenobi that he wanted him to join him, so they walked together through the temple. Maul told Obi-Wan that he never would have been able to do it if it wasn't for him. Obi-Wan smiled and told Maul that he didn't do anything for him. Maul did all the work. Sure, but he wouldn't be here without Obi-Wan. Maul turned and asked Obi-Wan to be by his side at his knighting ceremony. Obi-Wan smiled and accepted it. The Clone War went on for an extra year during this period of time, which is why Maul got here so quickly. While it might initially seem that Maul passed his trials quickly, it was true. But again, this was a testament to why Mace Windu was respected by so many. He was a great master, and it showed through his work. Depa Billaba, his last student, was on the High Council, and she wasn't much older than he was when he joined the Council. For Maul, it was redirecting all of his trauma into seeking something positive. Mace was really good at assisting Maul with this, and also, not for nothing, being on the active battlefront made it easier for Maul. The companionship he received from the clones and his master made him feel a sense of completion that he never felt before. Obi-Wan and him talked together for hours. There was still an awkwardness between them, but it was something that was being resolved. The thing for Maul and his turn to the light was the completion he never had. It was like an addiction. While it could have turned into something really negative for him, it didn't. He was able to feel a sense of fulfillment and continue to express himself as a Jedi. The code was a little rough, but Windu taught him some ways to interweave through the code without breaking the trust of the Council. This lesson, of course, came after Windu finally trusted him. That was the big thing for Mace Windu. It was his desire to have trust with his peers, students, and fellow Jedi. That was the one thing that had issues between him and Skywalker to begin with. Obi-Wan would be there with Maul when he was knighted by the High Council. Despite the Sith having been dead since he became a Padawan, the moment he became a Jedi Knight, it felt like the Sith were truly dealt with, and truly extinguished. Chancellor Amidala in the months prior to the end of the war would discover a plot by accident, and this would lead to the mass arrest of all Kaminoans and the imprisonment of Nala Se and Prime Minister Lama Su for their crimes against the galaxy. It was heinous to believe that they would have a plot to turn the entire Grand Army of the Republic against the Senate or the Jedi or whoever. But they did. Everything blew up in the Kaminoans' faces, and while the deaths of Dooku and Sidious would never be uncovered, because they were covered up by Grievous, who learned about their deaths on Stygon Prime, the newly reformed Republic would reach for the future. Anakin and Padme would have a long talk about how they would continue forward, and Skywalker decided he would remain a Jedi but spend time with his family and with her. Of course, keeping it a secret. This kind of mentality did make its way into Obi-Wan's mind, as he had himself a fling with his favorite politician in the galaxy. He and Satine had some de-stressed time, and even consecrated their relationship in secrecy, though it was much easier due to Satine not being a part of the Republic as a Mandalorian, and the fact that Mandalore constantly had to deal with little uprising of true Mandalorians as they called themselves. Obi-Wan had a total valid reason to spend months on end outside the temple on Mandalore. Anakin did eventually catch on, and then he couldn't believe his master. But when the children eventually got involved with Obi-Wan and Satine, it was time to set up playdates with Luke and Leia and Astrid. Maul eventually became a master of a Twi'lek Jedi Padawan named Desha Numa, and took her training very seriously as he could. He believed it was his responsibility to become a Jedi Master after everything the Jedi Order did for him. His eternal gratitude would have him working endlessly, with joy, to be the best Jedi version of himself, though nothing would compare to the happiness Maul finally achieved as a true Jedi Master in the healing galaxy. And that, my friends, is our wholesome story. Hashtag wholesome PP if you want more wholesome content. Oh god. Anyway, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo Weewy 670, Anikush Dank Runner, CT7567, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, the Eternal Padawan, Jedi Daguin, Sans the Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Khaled, Youngling Slayer 66, Madman Studios, Anakin 003, Fordo's Legacy Star Wars, Lemon Knight, Rex the Wolf, the man with 3 first names, Darksaint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out the Patreon. Do people use hashtags anymore? I don't know. That may have been like so out of touch of me to say. Anyways, Sith Clone Wars, 2 more episodes left until I am done. I am shooting for the end of October, early November. We'll see. There's a post to be made. I'm super excited. Patrons will see it first, obviously. Anyways, let's talk about the story. So this one was obviously much different in contrast to the old Obi Wan saves old Maul. And that's because these are 2 people in the prime of their lives, essentially. Give or take, obviously, Maul with the whole leg issue. But the point being is these 2 are in the prime of their lives. Maul is not as old and as, like, melodramatic as he would have been. This was a Maul that needed to have tough love, and that was the emphasis I tried to put on it. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you want more wholesome content, hashtag wholesome PP, or just put wholesome PP in the comment section because it's funny! Anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.